Hello everyone, hope you're all doing good. I'm giving everybody a few moments to get in here. To you, those of you who are early, just kind of hang out for a little bit, give people a chance to notice the live is going on and give them a chance to get in here. Hope you're all doing good. You want to share that where we need it? So I can adjust this camera. Using my phone so that the just give everybody a chance to get in here. Anybody that's going to show up and watch today. It's going to be a live Q&A. Going to give you all a chance to get any last minute, questions in and hear the. I have one so far. First off, I'll tell you all that the video is uploading for the sermon today. This is not taking place instead of the sermon. The sermon is uploading on YouTube. Unfortunately, I used the wrong browser. I usually use Chrome while I'm uploading, and I used Microsoft Edge today, which is one that I don't use, and Microsoft Edge just for some reason must be slower, and the video is only at 80%. That's over 12 hours that thing's been uploading, and yeah, there's unfortunately no way to speed that up. I'm going to go ahead and get started because the first question's already been submitted. It was submitted a while back when I started advertising that I was going to be doing this. One of our and so I'll just get started with that because the answer for it is unfortunately going to be very long. So our first question today comes in from one of our followers here, and that's Miss Mary. She's a great follower. She's been following us for a long time. Me and her have spoken a few times. She's donated some things to the ministry. Miss Mary asks, what's the main thing that I can say to a non-believing young person that would at least keep them thinking after I've tried everything I know to share? Well, unfortunately, I can't think of a main thing to say. So what I will do is just give you some of my own thoughts on it. Unfortunately, the in thing today is atheism. I've been noticing it a lot, especially with young people who tend to follow, trends, and they're being drawn into it. They are being swayed, if you will, by these poor arguments that people present to them, and the internet is sadly a tool that they use. And not only non-believers, but even young Christians who are not being taught rational reasons to believe in God. So their atheist friends, or the internet message boards, will lead them to believe that our religion, that God, is little more than a superstition, and they're basing basing my own thoughts on this. I will give you some advice that I hope will help you be more effective when you speak to them, and not only young non-believers, but any atheist that you bump into in your life, be they your friend or be they just a friend, or maybe even a family member. And tip number one that I'm going to give you is just to respect their intelligence, because let's face it, just how they think we are ridiculous. A lot of us Christians like to think that atheists are ridiculous as well. So yes, there are Christians who will openly mock a non-believer. And the first thing that we should never do is make that mistake. Most of these atheists out there are very, very intelligent, very smart people, and I have met a few of them. Not only are they smart, but they actually have a good heart. And even if they aren't, treat them as if they are smart. Our Lord tells us to do unto others, right? We hear that, we preach that to other people. So don't talk down to them. Don't condescend to them. Treat them with respect. Acknowledge that they are intelligent. You might start by saying things like, why? Well, they will be more likely to listen to you if you say that. I read an article where a lady actually recommends using a comment like, "Oh, come on, you're too smart to be an atheist. I know you can see through all those bad arguments." Things like that. It helps you to get through to them more. My grandma used to say, "You catch more flies with sugar." So just treat them kindly. Now, number two, you should try something like finding a common ground with them. Sadly, when we, as believers, are talking with a religious skeptic, we will most likely disagree with them about God and religion. But this shouldn't be a starting point, should it? No. You should start with things that you agree on. There are plenty of things that you can both appreciate, I'm sure. Maybe it's something like the value of science. Maybe it's thinking critically. Use that. This would show them that you also value evidence, and that you're following where that evidence leads, even if it requires rejecting a belief that you had and causes you to change your mind on something. Begin with that common ground. Then you can move on through to points that you disagree on. Then try number three, ask questions. Ask good questions. Not just questions, good questions. Don't start off banging on them with values. Ask them, what do you believe? This will help you in actually two different ways. Firstly, you'll be able to understand where they are coming from. It makes it easier to prevent you from responding with the bare bones of belief, okay? You'll be able to get them to clarify what they believe, and they will begin to see holes in how they view things. This may cause them to actually question their atheist belief. Amen. There are two questions that you can also raise with an atheist. Ask them, what is your strongest argument for God that you hear? When somebody talks to you about God, what is the strongest argument that you hear? And why does it fail? Or let me word it a different way. What is the best reason to believe in God, and why does that not convince you? That's a better way of wording that. You could find that it puts them on the spot. And no, I don't mean in a bad way, but in a way that will make them reflect on it. They'll reflect on why have they really considered God in a fair and thoughtful way. In my research, I couldn't find anything where an atheist should say, where very few have actually read on books that defend God. They don't like doing that, and if they had done it, they don't seem to have really studied it. Sorry, and that usually makes them respond with a very poor argument. One that an honest follower of God could usually quickly just reject it. Now, how do they usually respond? Well, something like, the world is so complex that many people rely on God to explain things that are biologically complex, things that science can't currently explain, but science is increasingly closing on all the gaps of knowledge and pushing God to the margins. And this, among scientists, they actually like to call it, I'm looking at my notes here, they call it the God of the gaps argument. But it's so weak. It's very weak. So when they use this, you can say something like, oh, that's the best reason that you've got? I can think of several better reasons to believe in God than that. For example, and then just give them an example of another powerful argument, like the one I will be telling you here later. But another thing that you can ask them is, what would it take for you to believe? Now, this will tell you if they are actually open to believe in God, or maybe they're closed-minded, and if they are, they will usually set some extremely impossible standard. I was watching an interview with a scientist one time. This has been a long time ago, and I'm sorry, but it's been so long ago that I can't remember his name. But he was asked, what if you died and God was standing right in front of you? Would you believe in him then? And he actually answered and said, no, I would tell him that I must be dreaming because there's no such thing as God. Can you believe that? I mean, he's standing right in front of you and you're still going to tell him that he doesn't exist? Anyways, I bring this up because when you ask an atheist a question, sometimes you might hear, well, I guess I'd believe in God if he appeared right in front of me and told me he existed. Or if he wrote something in the stars, such as, my name is God and I exist. Now, there is a problem with that answer, and you could point it out. Even if that happened, some skeptic somewhere would find some way of explaining it. Trust me, I've been paranormal investigating for a very long time, and there's no way that you can present a skeptic with something that will satisfy them. I've watched skeptics just reach for the dumbest answers. Oh, it's because it was cold and the wind blew this way. And they always have an answer, even if it's not a really good one. If God had done this for someone, some skeptic would just say that that person was hallucinating. Or maybe he was looking for some light projection that the government was experimenting with. They use things like that. I've seen it. I say this because they always find, like I said, some natural reason for things. So when you get this type of answer, push back. Tell them, no, we need a more convincing reason. Something like maybe a philosophical argument, and then present them with that argument. So let's talk about some evidence of God. If you hang around with an atheist long enough, you will hear the same response as the one given by Bertrand Russell. I have it right here in my notes, who once asked what he would say if he were face to face with God at Judgment Day, and God asked him, why didn't you believe in me? Russell answered, I would say, not enough evidence. There's so many people who would believe if they saw enough evidence. So when they say this, don't panic. That's the first thing you need to do, is just don't panic. Believe it or not, this is an important first step for them. When someone wants proof, or they want evidence, if you will, before they will accept a belief, that's not a bad thing. It means they're not willing to believe without some support. So clarify it with them. What do you mean by evidence? Are you looking for scientific evidence? Because that would be something that you could hear. Scientific evidence is something that you can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. Things that can either confirm or debunk a hypothesis. But this isn't the only type of evidence. There's many things that exist that there are no physical proof of. There's no physical evidence of it. We believe it on the pure basis of another sort of evidence. The same is true for God's existence. If you believe in God or not, He is, by definition, immaterial. He's transcendent. By immaterial, I mean He's not made of something physical. He has no physical matter. He isn't made of skin and bone like you and me. He's transcendent because He exists beyond space and time. When we're looking for God, we can't expect to find some, direct physical scientific evidence. And this is important. It is not that we have not yet found evidence, even if it may exist. It's just that it's impossible for it to exist. You'll never find God's hair. You'll never find God's footprint. There is no experiment that will show you that He exists. Right? Now, do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's impossible to demonstrate that He does exist. It's just that not in science. Right? Science is not the means to use to prove or disprove God. You can't do that. Science will never prove that He doesn't. They will never prove that He doesn't exist, no more than a metal detector will find a rock or wood. Right? You need a different tool. I hear you asking, well, what tool do I need? Well, that is philosophy. Philosophy is a way of discussing, more important things in life. Things like, morality or the meaning of God. We use philosophy to probe realities that we cannot detect with our own senses. Making it an excellent tool for exploring the evidence of God's existence. Now, philosophy will typically offer its evidence in the form of an argument, right? In fact, there are fewer than 20 arguments for God. Arguments that range from the clear and simple to the extremely complex. Some of these arguments will appeal to the universe or even history, believe it or not, rather than things like reason and beauty. This should tell you one thing about that, and it is that there are many, many angles to approach that question, the question of God. There's not only one better than the other. But since this is going on long, and let's face it, this is supposed to be a Q&A, we're just going to take a look at one of those arguments that I feel is the strongest argument. Now, some people watching might not like the terms that I'm going to use, and that is argument or evidence. And if you are one of them, you can instead call it a clue. We're going to look at clues that point to a common conclusion, just like a road sign. A sign does not prove the destination actually exists, does it? You see a sign pointing you towards. I'm from Louisiana. There was always signs that pointed to Jonesville. Jonesville is one of them small towns that if you blink, you miss it. But there were signs that pointed there. Now, just because you're driving through there and you see a sign saying Jonesville, if you haven't seen it, felt it, touched it, or anything, you can't prove that it exists. But it does point you to it. It just points the way. These arguments that we're talking about are signposts to God. Okay, so let us look at one of these signposts that, in my opinion, presents a simple, powerful argument that God exists. It's called the Kalam Argument. I got it wrote right here, K-A-L-A-M. I believe it's called Kalam Argument, and it dates way back to the Middle Ages. But it's one of the more popular arguments in Christian philosophy. Now, William Lane Craig, he was he loved it. He actually wrote a book on it. It's a very simple argument, and it's probably the easiest one for you to actually memorize. You should be able to memorize this. And it has two premises and then a conclusion. Let's look at them, okay? Premise number one is everything that begins, I should say, let me back up. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. And that's the first premise. Premise number two is the universe began to exist. And then the conclusion is, then the universe has a cause. If you can memorize those three steps, and don't worry, this will be going up on YouTube way later. I will put those actually in the description, so it'll help you memorize it better. Just memorize those three simple things, and it'll help you be equipped to deal with a skeptic. But let us unpack those three. Okay, the first premise: everything that begins to exist has a cause. We need to make sure we get this right, okay? Because most atheists love to attempt, okay, to refute it by saying things like, well, if everything that exists has a cause and God exists, then what caused God? But does that premise say everything that exists has a cause? No, it says everything that begins to exist has a cause. God, by definition, whether you believe in Him or not, is eternal and never began to exist. So therefore, this does not apply to Him, right? So the question of what caused God is like asking, who's the bachelor married to? Or what caused the uncaused to be? Now, regardless, these questions do not seem, they just don't make sense, do they? You know, they are nonsense because they confuse the meaning of the term. I hope that cleared that up for you. Now let's look back at the first premise again. Is it true? Does everything that exists have a cause? And that's common sense. Yes, it's simple. It just says that nothing that just springs into existence without a cause. Could you imagine our world if things like that did happen? You know, there just would be chaos and things just popping into existence like some sleight of hand. No, that's actually a poor analogy. Sleight of hand is a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Forget that. It would be worse, a lot worse. You see, in a world that violates this premise, that rabbit would just pop in and out of being even without a magician's hat. So let's just. I think there are not many sane people who would believe that would happen. So, through their own experience, most people believe and agree that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Now, let's look at the second premise. This is one that says the universe actually began to exist. This one is a little bit more controversial, I guess you could say. Even St. Thomas once said that the truth that the world had a beginning is only known by faith and not reason. Now, nonetheless, a lot of great minds from the past and even the present time People from like Saint Bonaventure all the way to William Lane Craig, often they offer their own arguments that defend it. One of these arguments, which Saint Bonaventure actually included in his Paradoxes of the Universe, of the Infinite, his argument goes like this: if the world has always existed, then there would be an infinite number of past days. However, if there was an infinite number of past days, we never would have been able to arrive at the present day, because an infinite series, by definition, cannot be traversed. Since we have arrived at today, it follows that there must have a beginning of time. Even our modern physicists seem to give weight to it, despite models advanced by some physicists in recent years. Since the advent of the Big Bang Theory, the consensus is that the universe actually has a beginning. They say things like 14 billion years ago. Stephen Hawking's 70th birthday party, Alexander Vilenkin spoke in front of some of the greatest scientific minds of our world, and he said that all of the evidence that we have says the universe has a beginning. If that doesn't surprise you, then it should, because it's very, very rare that a scientist speaks with such conclusivity. But he stated that in his opinion, that it's not just that some of the evidence points to the beginning of the universe, or even the majority of the evidence, but that all of the evidence points that way. So let us look at this conclusion again. We see that the two premises are accepted. Am I right? Everything that begins has a cause. The universe began to exist. And since that is the case, then the conclusion must logically follow. You can't avoid it. If everything that began has a cause, and the universe began to exist, then something caused it. That must lead you to think, what caused the universe? It could not have just been something in the universe. You know, something in the universe can't cause it, because you can't cause yourself to exist. That defies logic. How can you say, my right arm caused me to exist? That can't be true, no more than saying you caused yourself to exist. You didn't exist, and neither did your arm. So it must have been something beyond the universe, beyond matter, beyond energy, beyond space, beyond time. Does that sound familiar? That is something transcendent, immaterial, eternal. And it created something so massive, so complex, the universe. Am I right? Sorry. Imagine the power and the intelligence that it took. What does that sound like to you? Thomas Aquinas put it this way: it must be people. I'm going to look at how he wrote that. That is what most people mean by God. Now, philosophically, we just proved God is very, very abstract. It doesn't give you that warm feeling of faith, does it? It doesn't prove the fullness of God, especially the facts that we receive because God has revealed them to us. But it does give us a sign that points to it, doesn't it? It points you in the right direction. Now, not everyone is going to accept it, unfortunately. No, not everyone's going to accept it. This argument is well constructed. It's impressive. It makes it difficult for, I'm going to say, most atheists to reject it. So do your best to just memorize those three statements. Like I said, I'm going to put them in the description of this video when I post it on YouTube. But here they are again. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. We proved that. The universe began to exist, so it has a cause. The universe has a cause. Those are the three. If you're able to memorize them, you will have an argument for God and be ready to use them when someone challenges your faith. But To end this answer, just do not allow an atheist friend or family member to intimidate you and make you feel anxious when you're defending your faith. Be confident in the fact that there are many good arguments for God, and it is your job to share it. I hope this answers that question, even if it is a bit long and not just some simple answer. I'm sorry. So I'm gonna give you guys a few moments to come in with an answer. But I hope, Miss Mary, I hope that answers your question. And I hope it was a good answer. I hope that it helps you. I'll give you guys a few moments if you have a question. All right. Well, I guess that'll be all for today. I hope you guys enjoyed the question, and I answered some questions. Maybe some of you actually had thought on that one as well. So thank you for joining me here, and I hope to see you all here next week on the new Sermons in the Park episode. Um, I want to again apologize that I haven't been doing them live anymore, that I haven't been doing them on YouTube. This is me actually using my phone. That's why the video quality, if it's worked as well as I hope it has, worked. So thank you all for joining me here, and I'll see you all here next week. Thank you.